Hi everyone, I'm asbestos attorney Justinian Lane. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Asbestos Rewind, where we take a look at all the various ways that humans have used asbestos throughout history. Today it's the golden age of asbestos, and we're going to talk about how Hollywood started using asbestos in the 1930s and onward. So we're going to take a trip back now to September of 1933, when Asbestos magazine published this article entitled Asbestos in the Movies. Let's see what they had to say about how asbestos helped the show business industry get off the ground. Imagine a featured player, a great actress, whose doings were never chronicled, whose name was never flashed in Mazdas, never in fact mentioned. And if you're wondering what a Mazda is, we've all furiously Googled it, and the best as we can tell, it's like a marquee or maybe on the credits. It's a term that's gone out of use, and thanks to a certain car manufacturer, it's kind of hard to find anything that's not car-related about Mazda. If you know exactly what this meant, please contact us so we can do an update to this, and I personally would love to know. Impossible, you say, and yet that is precisely the position in which asbestos finds itself in the movies. For the role it plays is linked with trick photography. What we call special effects was trick photography back in the day. To describe it would, in the opinion of studio executives, dispel audience illusion. In vain, I argued with Paul Snell of Paramount Publics. Paul Snell was the publicist of Paramount in the time. I argued with him, this magazine is mainly read by asbestos buyers, purchasing agents whose interest in pictures will thereby likely be increased rather than lessened. And Mr. Snell didn't want the secret spilled, he said. Employees read it, he objected, or an asbestos man may take it home at night, leave it on the library table where wife, junior, the girls, or neighbors might scan it. Such secrecy is kind of funny over something that seems very simple to us today, but remember, movies were really kind of new in the time in 1933, and they were developing new technologies to do special effects, and they didn't want it to leak out. He continues, so to publicize asbestos film career here would violate a confidence and perhaps forfeit my studio correspondent privileges. But asbestos is working in one of those rare million-dollar extravaganzas as this is written. Back in the day, $1 million was a huge budget for a movie, so keep that one in mind too. The sign of the cross. If you chance to see it, you will be able to see asbestos functioning before the camera. Meanwhile, you can read between the following lines. So he's going to telegraph what they're using this in the movie for. Sheet asbestos, then, is used in breakaway scenes to protect airplanes, autos, etc. from complete destruction after deliberate crashes. On location, in conflagrations, it localizes fires. Nearby buildings are sometimes leased by the producers and stripped of more combustible roofing materials, and asbestos shingles substituted. But it is back at the studio on set where asbestos almost steals the show. Now, asbestos roofing shingles were some of the first uses of asbestos, so it's not surprising in 1933 they'd have been using it there to prevent the various fires, as Hollywood was always setting buildings on fire and wanted to be able to have them preserved, so asbestos would certainly do that. But now they're going to talk how it was used on set, and this is where it actually starts to get really interesting. Sets, as you know, are stage representations of building interiors, 15 to 100 in each picture. A major motion picture studio may have 10 pictures in simultaneous production. Set wall sections are in many cases fabricated from asbestos board, for it's been found that when properly framed about 12 inches off center, asbestos board conquers that talkie-bogey microphone reverberation. This again, 1933, this is really early on in the asbestos industry and the movie industry, and they're trying to figure out, in the movie industry, how not to have too much noise. Now, asbestos has long been known to be a good sound dampener. There's ancient tales of felling trees with axes and it not reverberating because it was wrapped with asbestos. And a lot of asbestos manufacturers made products that were specifically to dampen noise. One was called kill noise, which you kind of figure out what that was for. So continuing on, does stage business demand a real fire in place? Then the firebox is built of asbestos board, cleverly colored and scribed to simulate brick. For this purpose, Lynn Buell, purchasing agent at Paramount, buys nearly 500 sheets a year of 42-inch by 48-inch asbestos board. So 500 sheets a year, this is at Paramount in 1933, getting cut and sawed and sanded and manipulated anytime Hollywood had to try to make a movie. So they wanted to contain the fire. That's what it was used for. Mobile camera booths are insulated with asbestos wool or felt to prevent the camera's grind from being recorded on the adjacent mic. And the lights or sun arcs, of which there are sometimes 100 or more to a set, are equipped with asbestos-faced blinders, or ears as they are called. These ears cut off or control the play of the powerful lights, and because of the intense heat projected by them, the steel ear shield must be completely faced with asbestos. The asbestos in this case is clipped to the steel by a metal strip. For this and other such miscellaneous usage, the studio buys about 50 rolls of 36-inch material a year. So now we're putting more asbestos and we're putting it in a camera booth. So the poor camera operator who was in there would have been breathing asbestos every time he was inside working on that. Now in 1933, the asbestos industry, some of the manufacturers were certainly aware of the health hazards of their product, but no one in Hollywood was. So you really feel bad for these guys. And when people ask, why did so-and-so in the movie industry develop an asbestos-related cancer? If it was a long time ago, this was part of the reason why. Asbestos has not, so far, been found entirely satisfactory for falling snow, but for dressing winter scene sets, it is unexcelled. Down at the Fox lot in Westwood, California, they are dressing an outdoor set as this is written for a picture so far untitled. We've been trying to figure out which picture this is, and it's a little hard to do. If you have any idea as I read this description what movie they're talking about, definitely get in touch with us. I want to get a copy of that and see this, because this sounds just incredibly dangerous. The set has been ingeniously built on the slope of a natural arroyo which bisects the lot. In representation of a Norwegian farmstead, marks of a sled are plainly visible in the snow, in the little lane which drops down into the ranch hall. It and its outbuildings and about an acre of this homestead are covered with snow to a depth of about 8 inches. It piles around the building in drifts, and above on the eaves it has been cleverly rounded. The transplanted firs and spruces, too, are encrusted on their lee sides. As an ex-Canadian, I can testify that asbestos makes better snow than snow. An acre covered, with 8 inches of asbestos, powdered asbestos piled up, an acre. That's just tons and tons of raw asbestos dust that was dumped out there in Westwood, which in 1933 was not exactly a bustling place. But the amount of that fiber that must have blown all over the entire area is just terrifying. 8 inches for an acre. Never heard of such a large use of asbestos before, and definitely want to see whatever this movie was. But movies we do know about and that some of us have definitely seen is in the next paragraph. Danny Hall, the clever art director at Universal Studios, made some 5,000-year-old cobwebs for a picture called The Mummy in about 5 minutes. Rubber cement with asbestos sprinkled on it to represent the accumulated dust of centuries. That was a huge movie, The Mummy, of course, with Boris Karloff, and it was spawned many, many sequels. And the next time that's running on one of the old movie channels, when you see the dust, remember that was powdered asbestos mixed with rubber cement, and everyone who was on set was exposed to that needlessly. But again, Hollywood didn't know, so we can't blame them too much for that one. Continues on, his rum row schooner for the picture Destination Unknown is the most elaborate and authentic set I've seen in Hollywood this winter. She's loaded to the guards with bootleg liquor. A good bit of the cargo is old French vintage wines, asbestos dusted. So now we're inside a hull of a ship that's full of asbestos. Shipyard workers have always been exposed to lots of asbestos for the same reason that these folks would have been. The ships were insulated and they were enclosed spaces. So everybody going into that set, setting the scene up and filming was no doubt stepping in it, kicking it all up, and everyone on that set breathed it in. Movie characters, in fact, drink thousands of gallons of wine each year, decanted from cobwebby and asbestos-dusted bottles. Who knew, right? While it is the fashion to ridicule Hollywood and all of its works as fakes, they are hardly that. It is by these means producers honestly strive for greater realism, to the end of our enjoyment of their pictures shall be the greater. Sets and props, the like of which Hollywood theater has never dreamt, are to the thousands of movie craftsmen commonplace. At each studio, there are from 5 to 20 huge sound stages, each about 175 feet by 100 foot by 85 foot. These buildings are in most cases of double stud wall construction on separated foundations, the space between packed with asbestos fill for complete isolation of extraneous noise. Since the double asbestos-filled doors are always closed during shooting, air conditioning is important. All these air casings are asbestos-covered, of course, as are all boilers, ducts, compressor pipes, etc. Insulation is, in fact, carried to the nth degree. Why? Because the engineer is charged to maintain temperature and humidity with absolute uniformity. His call sheets list the number of players, animals, etc. in each scene. From that, he estimates the number of technicians participating, the number of lights, and their candle power. Hence, from these totals, he can calculate the number of BTUs exhausted as his chilled air drops through the battery of lamps and company. With studio overhead metering along at about $2,000 an hour, it's obvious that makeup must not run and delay production, that players and technicians must be kept peppy. With the correct insulation, this is being accomplished. So early Hollywood ran on asbestos. All of the studio sets were built with double asbestos walls. The doors were asbestos. The ducts for the air conditioning, all of this stuff was asbestos because the lights back in the day were incredibly, incredibly hot. They were terrified about fire ripping through and burning everything down. So they did what they could to prevent that, which was to put asbestos. And I don't know if any of the old studio buildings from the 30s are still standing or not, but if they are, I bet that the asbestos is still in the walls and it lasts forever. So those would still be some very dangerous places to work if they haven't been torn down. This peculiar business of picture making was born 20 years ago in an abandoned barn at the rear of a frost-bitten orange grove. In a single decade since, it purchased $1 billion. This is in 1933, $1 billion worth of building materials. Now with a payroll greater than the population of some American states, it has become the 6th greatest industry in the land. Alert withal as a jackrabbit, it is quick to junk obsolete or misfit equipment and methods. Founded, it may have been on abstract story plots and ideas. Today it rests on sober engineering and economic fact. Find these producers a new use for asbestos which will improve the quality or reduce the expense of their pictures, and you have sold a bill of goods, maybe succeeded in advancing from asbestos from featured player to star. Now, this article was written in September of 1933 and talked about some of the famous movies of its day that had asbestos in it. But of course, Hollywood continued using asbestos for many years. Two movies that all of you have almost certainly heard of that used asbestos were It's a Wonderful Life and The Wizard of Oz. The snow in both of those movies was actually powdered asbestos. Powdered asbestos got used a lot for snow in movies, and also people used to buy boxes of powdered snow to put on their Christmas trees at home. So that was one of the special effects, or as they called it, trick photography, that made its way from Hollywood into the home. And no matter where it was putting people's lives at risk, because breathing asbestos when it's airborne, friable is the word, when it can be torn apart and breathe it, that's the most dangerous type. When you think about all of the different roles that it played in the Hollywood industry, that asbestos played, you realize once again that the 20th century, for better and mostly for worse, was built on asbestos. Thanks for tuning in today for this episode of Asbestos Rewind with the golden age of asbestos. I hope you'll join us again on our YouTube channel, where we're going to continue posting videos like this. We'll see you there.